Following popular vote wins in all three early states, including the crucial Nevada caucus, Bernie Sanders is proving that he is entirely electable. Now, that is despite the cries from establishment hacks and angry MSNBC personalities who have been declaring otherwise. Bernie's momentum is nearly unstoppable at this point. His support from minority communities is growing, and no one save Biden is anyone near him in polling. And by the way, Biden has less delegates than Pete Buttigieg. And so Bernie Sanders is leading in all accounts of the race. And when it comes to delegate counts, as I said, Bernie leads by a huge margin. So it's time to get rid of the notion that Bernie is unelectable and that his policies are not wanted by the American people. Now, during last night's CNN town hall, he did an audience poll of some of his policies, and he asked them whether or not they are radical. Take a look.
Let me just tell you, I don't think that that's true. Is raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour a radical idea? No. Is making sure that all of our kids have the opportunity to get a higher education, regardless of their income, because we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free, is not a radical idea? No. This is a scientific poll. You hearing this? Is doing what every other major country on earth does. Jane and I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. Somehow they managed to guarantee health care for every man, woman, and child in that country at half the cost that we spend per capita. Is guaranteeing health care to all people as a human right a radical idea? No. Is addressing the existential threat of climate change a radical idea? No. All right. I rest my case.
All right, so it's not just that crowd of people that were enthusiastic, and Democratic voters, I assume. But look, it's the American people as well. There's a lot of support for things like single payer. Even, by the way, 51% of Americans support single payer. That is according to the most recent Kaiser Family Foundation poll. You know, back earlier, say 2018, it had a 70% approval rating. So what happened? Well, it turns out that Republicans have attacked this, and as well as corporate Democrats, mercilessly, and they managed to get it down to still just slightly over half of all Americans. Fascinating. Now, 54% of independents, by the way, which is important, also support single payer. Now, it is true that a public option does poll better, with total of 66% support. But what the public doesn't know about a public option is that, unfortunately, it has a lot of the same problems that make the insurance system, private insurance system, unaffordable today. It doesn't do anything about the rising of prices, and still, by the way, requires the payment of premiums and deductibles. Now, one thing that was, and copays, by the way, one thing that was interesting is a lot of people also mistakenly think that Medicare for All also involves copays, premiums, and deductibles, just like insurance. So it's almost as if Americans still consider a Medicare for All single-payer system similar to insurance. It's almost as if we're stuck in that mindset because we don't understand that there is a better way of doing healthcare, of health insurance, and that is through a single-payer option, which does not involve copays, premiums, or deductibles. And so that is interesting. And that is probably one of the reasons why a public option is right now more favorable. Nonetheless, he is not hurt by his support for Medicare for All. In fact, that actually endears voters to him because he is being consistent, unlike Elizabeth Warren, for example, and he sticks by his guns, and he's being honest about this, right? So now, as far as Bernie goes, and kind of tying that along with that is that he's the most popular politician in the country by a large margin. Polls also have him as most trusted candidate on healthcare. That's even when, by the way, he was polling behind Vice President Joe Biden in national surveys, which is now, of course, over. Bernie Sanders is now leading the field nationally in the primary. And then in a lot of different battleground states as well. Now, polls have Bernie Sanders beating Donald Trump in a lot of matchups. For example, the latest UW Madison Elections Research Center survey, Sanders has a bigger lead over Trump in Michigan and Pennsylvania. No surprise, since he won Michigan here in 2016. And a lot of people that decided that they would vote for Donald Trump instead because Bernie Sanders was no longer on the ballot. Not only that, but you also had a 2-point lead over Donald Trump in Wisconsin, as Joe Biden, as Elizabeth Warren do. So he wins in all of these different states in matchups against Donald Trump. Not only that, but he beats Trump even more than a lot of his rivals in national polling. For example, Bernie Sanders leads Trump by 3 points, 47-44. Biden, of course, beats Trump still at 47-45, so a little bit closer of a margin. You also have Warren barely beating Trump by 1 point, 46-45. Buttigieg tying Donald Trump, Klobuchar losing to Trump by 1 point, and Bloomberg losing to Trump by 3 points. So much for Michael Bloomberg. Now, Bernie Sanders has also proven that he can win over moderate voters, as he did in Nevada. Now, in the Nevada caucus, Sanders won a plurality of self-identified moderate or conservative Democrats. In fact, the Washington Post's Matt Visser tweeted this: the Sanders win was emphatic. He prevailed among those with college degrees and those without. Again, Elizabeth Warren tends to do better with college-educated white liberals. Even so, Bernie Sanders was the second choice. Not only that, but you had in-union and not in-union people. The culinary union, for example, healthcare was their major concern, even though they have great healthcare through the culinary union. 6 in 10 of the union members who voted in the Nevada caucus said that healthcare, they support a single-payer government-run insurance system. That is very important. And I think I know why. They have excellent insurance, and they want to make sure every other American has that same insurance. There is nothing better than peace of mind when it comes to something so important as health. Not only that, but he also won basically in every age group except for those over 65, and had narrowly carried moderates and conservatives in Nevada. Sanders also does extremely well with the backbone of any Democratic coalition: minorities. Exit polling from Nevada showed Bernie Sanders with the support of 69% of Latino voters. 69%. Nationally, Morning Consult poll showed that Sanders has overtaken Biden with black voters nationally. 33% of black voters said that they had backed Bernie Sanders. 29% said that they would back Joe Biden. And often, weirdly enough, a lot of Biden voters consider Bernie Sanders to be their second choice. I find that absolutely fascinating. But look, it's kind of our own bubble, right? Because people are complicated. Some Bernie Sanders voters, or some Amy voters, for example, Klobuchar, might consider Bernie Sanders to be the second choice. I mean, it's weird. I don't get it, but it is what it is. And so you can't necessarily put people in little boxes and expect them to stay there, which is fascinating and actually really good for someone like Bernie Sanders. To have someone who considers maybe Pete Buttigieg number one, to say, you know what, I would go for Bernie Sanders, he's my number 2 choice, or vice versa even, as this happens in some of the cases. You never know. You never know. And so that also shows that they didn't care about, for example, the Russia stuff, right? There was a report that came out on the eve, I think it was actually the day before the Nevada caucus, that claimed that Bernie Sanders was being supported by Vladimir Putin, right? By the Russians. So that report, and it blew up on Twitter, by the way, as it often does, things like that, where Bernie Sanders had been briefed a month ago that there are people apparently online, Russian bots and trolls, that would like to back Bernie Sanders in order to elevate him to take on Donald Trump, to which the assumption is he would lose to Donald Trump, right? And so I remember a lot of angry, Hillary Clinton trolls and things like that that would that were getting very angry at him. A lot of pundits were getting very angry at Bernie Sanders and Democratic establishment figures. Oh my God, how dare Bernie Sanders not share classified information from a classified briefing with the American public on Russia? But again, nobody cared about that in Nevada. It wasn't even in consideration. And so, sorry. Now, there's also other stuff. The supposed rape essay, which, by the way, that wasn't a rape essay. It was actually fighting in a weird way against traditional gender roles. People didn't care about all that stuff. So all the people that say I've supposed giant oppo dumps on Bernie Sanders is going to sink him. No, none of that is effective. Voters only care about, at least Democratic voters only care about one thing: beating Donald Trump. And I believe Bernie would do that. That's why you heard video of saying, Donald Trump would rather have gone up against Hillary Clinton and would rather now go up against Michael Bloomberg, because he does not want to go up against Bernie Sanders. Why? It's because I think he knows he would have a very, very difficult time, if not could possibly lose the election. Whereas you put him against Amy Klobuchar, he's going to have a much easier time going against someone like that. And not only that, but a lot of voters care about authenticity, and they like him because he's consistent and because he's honest. Even a lot of Republicans out there do appreciate the honesty, even if they don't agree with him on policy. He's not a slimy politician like Mayor Pete. They know at least what they're getting. Now, all of this shows that, of course, that Bernie Sanders is not a radical person. He's right in the pulse of the American people. They like him. They trust him. They agree with him on most of the policy positions. And they also believe, unlike last time, that he could beat Donald Trump. If that is not the picture of electability, well, then I'm not sure what is. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.